So like I mentioned, this month we have a presentation from kind of a newish Art and Data Club member who's an artist, art therapist, and transcultural adoptee, Nick Rademacher. I'll let you welcome Nick. I'll let you take it from here.
Hi, yeah, I guess I just joined like in the spring, so thank you for being so welcoming and for letting me present. Um, so the project I'm working on is, and thank you, Michael, for sending out the email, so there's a bit more context and maybe I don't have to go too far into it. But I guess basically it stems out of a project I did in 2020 called Being Adopted, where I did like a crowdsourcing through social media for self-identified adult adoptees to choose 3 words to represent or just speak about their experience as an adopted person. And, you know, since then I've been doing more research and I've been wanting to do more adoptee-centered projects. And so this new project, it's called We Are Not Our Cruxes. And so it looks at so there's this book that was, or this article that was written in the 80s, and it's got these 7 core issues in adoption. And those were coined by a social worker who's also an adoptive mom, but they've never been empirically studied. And as an adoption competent therapist, we use them a lot, but I was kind of like wondering, like, is that really what we struggle with? I mean, some of them rang true to me, but it would be interesting to actually figure out if those are issues, and if it's that way also for those who are adults who have gone through an adoption or through foster care, and then also with the title We Are Not Our Cruxes, I also wanted it to be like strengthening and empowering, like we're so much more than that, and our experiences are yeah, it's not just these issues and trauma that we've been through. So the project is these series of hybrid events. So online and in person. In person will be in Los Angeles, and there'll be presenter or like panelists who are adoptees or those who've been through the foster care system, artists, activists, mental health professionals, scholars who will talk about their experiences. And then there'll be an art-based healing workshop afterwards. And so those who identify as an adult adoptee or someone who's been through the foster care system is then invited to fill out a survey and upload their artwork. And then that'll be part of a online multi-layered interactive visualization. And so that's what those images were that were sent in the email, some kind of mock-ups. And I have a little presentation that I put together to kind of, it has the survey and then it has the mock-ups, and they're a little bit more updated. So let me present and then share my screen. So the survey, it's interesting. Anyways, so I'm asking for names, and it's just basically to make sure that I can match everything up. For online, it'll be easy, but for people who are in person, I just want to be able to make sure, but then the data will be destroyed. And then because I'm going to do right now it's 5 events. It may only be 4, but we're looking at 5. I also want to be able to see whether or not these people are participating more than once. And so I'm working with a consultant out of Loyola Marymount University for the research, and she suggested that that would be an easy way to kind of capture that data. And then I'm just looking at a lot of demographic data. I'm not sure, like I think gender is important. It's not necessarily important to the study, but I think to get a better understanding of who the participants are, I wanted to include gender and gender identity. Race is important in that there are a lot of international transracial adoptions, and people who have gone through the foster care system and been adopted oftentimes are placed with families that are not of the same race or ethnic origin. So that's why we've got the one for the person filling it out, and then also for the adoptive family. And the same with identifying as Latinx or Hispanic. Again, I'm not sure that the education piece has any bearing on the study itself, but I think it's just interesting to have another set of data to understand better the people who are completing it. We also want to know where people are. I've been talking with, I don't know, those of you who are familiar with Michael Manalo, but he's a UX designer and information architect, and he does a lot of like mapping projects. And so I'm working with him to do the online visualization. And so we were talking about other data points that we can use outside of just the artwork and the kind of struggles that people go with, which I'll get to in a second. And so like country that they reside in. And zip code is just for reporting purposes. So this project's funded through the Creative Corps, through the Arts Council for Long Beach. That was then done through the California Arts Council. The how old are you is basically because I want to make sure that I'm working with adults. And then these are all the different types of adoptions that I could find. But I also wanted space for other if there's something that's like non-mainstream as far as how people may have been adopted if they were adopted or if they only went through foster care. So it's, you know, through foster care and then to either the foster family, non-foster family, or a kinship adoption, intercountry or international, which is kind of an interchangeable terminology that different people use, stepchild adoption, and then private domestic or public domestic, and then an independent domestic adoption or other. I also wanted to kind of capture how old these people were when they were adopted, if, you know, or, you know, maybe they stayed in the foster care system. So maybe I should have a piece of how old they were put into the foster care system, how old they were when they were put into the foster care system. And then again, this will capture if they've been an inter-country adoption, what country they were born in, and then what country they were adopted into. And then the other piece is kind of just working on if like their relationship to adoption or to being in foster care. So if it's important to their identity, and if they feel that it had any impact on their mental health, being a therapist, and this being a healing workshop, I, you know, wanted to capture that. And then these are the big main questions of after we've done the panel discussion and then the art making, for them just to list their struggles. And I'm looking at 3 just to make it easy, and then giving them an opportunity to list more if they feel that, you know, there are other things that kind of came up for them as they were making the art or as they were participating in the panel discussion, because the discussion will be open. And then so this is a mock-up of, and this was set up when I thought that I was going to do 7 events. And so it's just kind of like they would be kind of floating and hovering, the artworks that were made in the different events. And this is all artwork that I made when I was in grad school. So I'm not using any client artwork in this. And then you could maybe click on one and there would be a struggle that was brought up. And so that would be grief, for example. And so then all of the artworks that identify grief as something that they struggle with would then kind of cluster around that word. And then if you were to click on one of those artworks, then the other 2 words would then also come up. And so then this would be just a mock-up of like the connections to the different pieces. And then this is kind of a mock-up of what it may look like. Other kind of cruxes or struggles that people, like the main ones that people come up with. And then the words that I chose here are based off of the data from the Being Adopted project that I did. And yeah, I think that's it as far as like what I'm thinking data collection wise and what I'm thinking visualization wise. I'm open to it changing based on however things come up. And then the fact that Michael Ronaldo had brought up, this idea of other data points that we can use. And so like how maybe like once that one piece is brought up, maybe there's like a list of like maybe race and country of that they reside in or something like that. But yeah, that's it. Oh, thank you for sharing, Wendy. Oh, that was private. Okay.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I'll kick off questions. How do you find your participants? Like, do you advertise? Are you on a listserv of adult adoptees?
So I've been, I would say since like 2015, I've been kind of a part of, I've been like going to support groups and being more aware of things that are going on online. And then with COVID, things kind of blew up and there's like a ton of different podcasts now. So for the Being Adopted piece, I had over I think 250 some odd participants in like 16 different countries. So I'm pretty confident that I'll have participants zooming in. I'm less confident about the participants in person in LA. But I will be kind of partnering with different organizations. And when I initially pitched the project, I needed to choose a zip code. Well, yeah, I needed to choose a zip code that was identified in the Healthy Places Index as like needing resources. And so I chose my zip code 90016 because that's where I live and it's one of the zip codes identified. So like the first event's going to be at the Baldwin Hills Branch Library. And so I'll also be putting out like physical flyers. And for the first one, all of my adoptees are local. So I'm excited about that. One person, he's an actor and a director, and I've known him since like 2016. Another, she's a mental health professional, and maybe 2017 I met her. And then the other one, she's actually my son's singing coach, and randomly it came up in his class. And so I'm excited to work with her too.
I just want to say this is such an amazing project and thank you for sharing it with us. And I'm just really excited about the possibilities of it. I mean, it seems like you have an idea of how you want to shape it, but that there's all this room for it to also be shaped by anyone that is participating in it. And then I was just curious, so that was like just my first feeling as you were showing it. I just felt like, I don't know, I'm really, really excited about it. And so I'm curious, the artworks, are those being created in the workshops, like both in person and Zoom? Okay. And then you're going to like, these are just sort of really practical questions. You're going to scan them and then create this like online visualization that can be navigable by whoever's looking at the website with the information?
Yeah, so with the exception of the January event, all of them will be, well, the supplies I'll be providing in person will be two-dimensional, so like collage, markers, colored pencils, pastels, things like that. And then I'll be encouraging people zooming in to bring in the same. And then I'm also going to ask people to kind of steer away from paint, just because it's hard to control, and that can kind of be a little bit more emotive, and so there's like less containment for them. And you know, the idea that during these conversations is that it'll bring up kind of feelings and possible, you know, uncomfortableness emotionally. And then the one in January is going to take place at William Grant Still Art Center, and they've got their annual doll show. And so talking with them, their Black doll show, they just wanted me to do the art making to kind of relate to their show. So I'll be bringing in doll making supplies and encouraging people zooming in to do that. But yeah, so people zooming in will just take pictures and then upload it. And then the other ones I've will be scanned. I mean, they'll also take pictures and upload it in Match, but since they're in person, I'd like to be able to scan them just to have a higher quality.
Nick, you mentioned that the data is going to be destroyed. Can you talk about that?
No, the names will be destroyed.
Oh, just
so the data, yeah, the name, so the identifying information will be destroyed. I am going to be video recording, both recording the Zoom, and then I'll have somebody documenting the video of the in-person. The idea is at some point to do like a short documentary of the process. I didn't receive funding for that portion of the project, so I'm just gonna get the raw materials so that I can do it later. So people will also be signing like an image release form and an artwork release form. And I'm figuring out how to make sure that those people who don't want to be included in it aren't included in it. But yeah, no, the data will stay. And then I'm also writing a research paper, which is why I'm working with the consultant at Loyola Marymount University.
As a fellow Creative Core recipient, I know that we have to log all of our, we have to like log a bunch of metrics and submit them and document our processes the whole way and fill out all those Google forms and everything like that. Are you adding that as like another layer of like data to the project in some way? Maybe not that anybody sees in the visualization, but just like that process of doing a project where you're gathering data, and then the people who gave you the money for the project also require that you gather their data on the project for them.
It's funny that you say that. They still haven't given us the reporting documents.
Hilarious.
Yeah, so
but also
I'm
like checks out.
I don't know if California Arts Council hasn't sent it to them or if they're just behind on getting it to us.
I think they're behind because we have it.
Oh, you have them. Oh, okay. So maybe I'll send an email.
Yeah, we had to all go to like a meeting where they explained it to us like very slowly several times.
Maybe you can share that with me. So I'm trying to document, like I'm documenting all the time I spend on stuff, like even just like 10 minutes sending out emails and texting people. And I know that my project is a little funky because it's also online, but it needs to be with that Healthy Places Index. And so, yeah, just trying to make sure that, and that's another reason for the zip code thing, is that I'm hoping that I can, that there are people, maybe not necessarily from 90016, but from other zip codes that have been identified as needing resources. And so also why I chose, not only, I didn't only choose mine because of where I live and it's just being there, but also my understanding through some like not like research, but like just kind of looking at things online is that like Art and Practice works with First Place for Kids, which is an organization that works with foster youth and transition age youth. And in their documentation, they say that there is and I couldn't find anybody that had like a specific data point on this, but they say that there's a high population of foster youth around in the surrounding area of Leimert Park. And so where I live is in the surrounding area of Leimert Park. And so looking at that, and then one of the organizations that I reached out to is Peace for Kids, and they're in South LA. And they work with transition age youth. So I'm hoping that my in-person participants will be from these, or I mean, it doesn't have to be all of them, but like some of them, right?
And I wonder if it would be germane at all to you to look to see if you can look at Rafik and Adol's studio. They have these he has these servers that create these like data clouds. So all the data that they clean, that his assistants clean, they then gets put into these clouds like before, like these are the data sets that he trains his neural networks on that generate those big moving images and everything. But he even has the data sets themselves visualized as big clouds, like actual clouds that you can move the cloud around with a mouse, and then you can click on one of the images of the cloud and then it magnifies and you can see what kind of flower the data set used to train. And then what you see on the big screen is like the final thing is the neural network dreaming the new flowers or whatever, right? But he even has the clouds of visual data in like another place that you could look at. So I just wonder if like you could reach out and he would let you go see how those are.
That's great. Yeah.
What is his
You
name?
worked with him. It's Rafik Anadol because you worked with him on Current. So
yeah, I was thinking, I was like, he probably won't remember me, but at least I could say
but
that
that's
I worked with
okay
him
because
on
like
Current.
that was a big project for him that led to what he's doing now. So
Okay. I wonder if he even answers his own emails, but
probably not, but
I doubt.
he has 5
I'll reach
full-time
out.
assistants who just clean data.
Okay, I had no idea. Wow, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Nicole, what was the name of it was Michael something that you had mentioned that you'll work with for the online data vision. How do you spell it?
Manalo, Manalo. And he works with I mean, he does the cultural asset mapping for 18th Street, and he works with Esri, and he does a bunch of other government things. I think I met him when I worked at DCA. It's funny how everything kind of meshes together after a while. But yeah, because he did the Promise Zone. I don't know if they're still working on that, but he did the Promise Zone cultural asset mapping. So yeah, he works, a lot of his projects are geographical. And so this one isn't, it's a mapping, but it's not like a geographical mapping.
Nick, I had a question about I don't know if you showed us the entire survey, and it sounds like you're still tweaking it. You had like the question about the participants' struggles being an adoptee.
Mhm.
And I noticed from your 2020 project, there were a couple, I like loved was like a large like data like response set, and also in the sample that you shared, the image that we put on Instagram, grateful was one of the responses, and that was very open-ended. I think you just asked for 3 words, so it wasn't, you know, leading for any sort of response. I'm just wondering if there's questions like on the flip side, like were there any positives from being like an adoptee, if though there's those kinds of stories. It may be counterintuitive, but I was just wondering if there's other kind of questions than the one you showed.
I like that idea. Yeah, so the being adopted was really open-ended. It's just 3 words for their experience. And so we did get some positive words. And I mean, I love or loved was one of the top ones. And so that was, it's also interesting if you've been on these, like in these adoptee Facebook groups and everything for a long time, there's a lot of trauma stories. And so it is really interesting to do a project like that and get positive experiences. Because it isn't, I mean, for some people it was very traumatic and they suffered abuse and things like that. But there's also those of us out there that didn't have that experience. I do like the idea of adding a question where they're able to share any positives that they may have. Yeah, the research is for struggles because of the 7 core issues in adoption. So like the 7 core things that like, and those things are like grief, loss, identity. So identity isn't a negative, but like things that we struggle with, right? Identity, intimacy, mastery, control is one, guilt and shame is one. So, but yeah, like I feel like it's kind of a long survey, but yeah, it was the whole survey with the exception of where they upload their artwork.
Yeah, while you're talking, I don't know if anybody watches the show Reservation Dogs at all, but there is a recent episode. It's not you know, a 1-to-1 correlation, but there was an episode that was all about kind of like these boarding schools, like these like Catholic boarding schools where I guess like Native orphans, you know, were sent. That was just super, you know, traumatizing to watch. But anyways, that just kind of came up, something that was like in
all over the States and also in Canada, it was like a huge assimilation. They would take these Native American children and place them either in boarding schools or with white families.
Yeah, I feel like it touched on a lot of these the core, you know, issues that you just listed.
There's actually a famous story from the St. Louis World's Fair where they take a group of, I think they're Lakota girls, and then they turn them into a basketball team. And they are pretty good at basketball. And then the guy who's responsible for their assimilation makes them go on tour throughout the whole country as this touring Native girls basketball team. Look what we can do to the natives. We can not only tame them, but we can make them athletes. And they sent them on this tour, all with the promise that he would pay for their schooling, their like university schooling. And then at the end of the tour, he ended up donating the money to a mission that converts natives instead.
Thanks for sharing that. I didn't know about that, Christy.
The St. Louis World's Fair had a lot of like human zoo type situations. They also had like a display from people from the Philippines where they put them in like grass skirts and loincloths and things and like grass huts and stuff that had nothing to do with their traditional ways of living or anything like that, but they just put them in like a one size fits all, like savage, foreign, exotic, other kind of thing, and like put them on display at the World's Fair as well. Like the St. Louis World's Fair had a lot of, I think it was not Sitting Bull. There's somebody else too who was on display the entire time, who was a famous chief. I don't think it's Sitting Bull. It might be, but who was a famous chief the whole time, that they made him sign autographs.
There's a Filipino artist in St. Louis, Jana Longholtz, and it does a lot of projects around that fair, and that's those specific things you're talking about, Kristen. If anybody wanted to post questions or comments in the thread, you're welcome to do that if you can't turn on your audio or don't want to unmute. And I think Zoom started this feature where the conversation can continue with participants after the meeting. So maybe if something comes up later, we can still add comments or thoughts.
Wondering if Nicole has any questions or things that you're still working out, figuring out, wondering about. I don't know. I don't know if we're the audience to figure that out with, but just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I liked Michael kind of commenting on thoughts of the survey. So I don't know if there's anything that anything else I could include, or something that you think doesn't really make that much sense. And then I liked Christy kind of giving me more inspiration visually with Rafiq's work to kind of look into that. I don't know if anybody knows of any other work that might be good for me to do more research on, or maybe you have a project that is kind of looking at the visualization of data in a similar way.
Ai Weiwei did this piece a long time ago where like people submitted drawings from all over the world, and then they mapped them to like an interactive kind of globe on a website, and it's the moon. It's like a Draw the Moon project or something like that. So it's like a replica, it's a digital replica of the moon, and then he asked people to draw little like doodles, and then they put them on wherever they're located or something like that. And then they eventually had to shut the project down because people were using it to protest against their governments in places where they're not allowed to protest. But that visualization is really interesting too, that I was thinking about, because they're little drawings and they're mapped on this like interactive thing where you can enlarge them. And
Well, that's cool. Thank you.
I feel like there's also Chrissy Brimage, an artist named Chrissy Brimage in New York. I've seen some work that she's also done with data where they're like orbs that are circling, kind of floating in space, and you can interact with them in like a VR space too as well. And you can click on the individual orbs and they have data attached to them as well, having to do with identity.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you both.
Actually, I feel like Wikipedia, I have to look into it, but there's a lot of projects that are around Wikipedia that have to do with people all over the world. Also, obviously, Wiki, right? Putting together data, but like mapping it also. I mean, I don't know what it looks like, but yeah, I'll have to look into that, and I can maybe send some links.
I'm sorry I missed the presentation. I was going to watch the recording of it later, but I was curious when I was looking at the website that has like the 3 words. You've got the ability to like filter things and you can like look up words. But I was just kind of curious, how did you figure out how you might want to like have words as data? And then also there's so much about your work that is about like sensitivity of like where, I mean, even with adoption, the idea of like where people came from, or so it makes me think of like where the words go after someone gave those words. But I was curious if you had some way that might be different of using data and the way that it gets moved that might be like similar to how you might think about how people were moving, especially with like adoption and things like that. I know that there's things I was looking at that I feel like are AI driven that are like, here's a display of how to think differently when you see all of the text. And it could be in terms of like, here's how often these words show up, or these are how these words connect to other words. But there's something that feels slightly wrong about using data in that extractive way to see patterns. When I think about the cutouts that you did of you, like inserting yourself in the same amount of time that you were in the previous, in one family, but then there's a biological family, to me, that has a totally, like it answers the question I have about like the psychological aspect of being in a different time, which is still more of like thinking about your memory. But to me, that's like kind of not using data in the right way. It's like instead of being pointed about this is you in this place in this time, it's way messier. Like even the cutout matches like the processing of it, of cutting a figure out of a 2-dimensional 3D thing, to me matches even just blending the 2 dimensions in a very rough way. So I was just curious if you maybe thought of doing the opposite of something that's normally a clean use of data. And what if there's like, I don't know how to put it, but sometimes people are even using AI to obscure stuff. Like I know that you can use different AI now to make it so that your photo can't be read by AI models and used in data sets. And what it's doing is it's kind of creating a slightly pointillistic version of a photo so that it thinks it's actually a pointillism painting, and it actually messes enough with the algorithms to miscategorize it. So I was thinking about like the idea of miscategorizing. Like what if someone, like going back to Christy and this World's Fair thing, what if people are like, we don't even know if they're Filipinos, we don't know, like instead of it being more specific, it's like finding ways to obscure for protection of people. Some of the AI I've used is to create like fake photos of you to upload to social media so that you're not giving your personal touch that then gets used. I don't know, there's like something fascinating to me about like AI for disruption, which still uses the same algorithms. It just has a different reason.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about kind of obscuring the data to protect the people who are giving the data, but at the same time, as adoptees, we've spent so much time being a name that we're not. And in my experience in the adoptee spaces, it's like we're looking for specifics. We're looking for who we are, even though it like doesn't exist and it'll never exist because of the relinquishment.
It feels like, sorry to interrupt, that this new project, I think, does a little bit about what Cedric is talking about, where you're using like drawings and images and artwork as opposed to words to describe an experience. So it's a little more kind of like fuzzy and messy and open-ended and more about memory and less easily categorized as well. So it feels like you kind of maybe like moved in that direction consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason that I want the art making is is because I did also see like an opening in the creative work that a lot of adoptees are making, which is like trauma stories, which I think is really important. And I don't want us to not tell our stories, but at the same time, you know, I was asking the question of what happens if we make something that is reflective of our experience. And so that's, I mean, that's going to be the prompt, is really to reflect on their experience and their experience. And I spent a lot of time thinking I needed to come up with like really specific like art therapy prompts for each event. And then I realized that I was just like, you know, less is more. And so it really needs to be just a reflective piece that they make in 45 minutes.
I think one of the things I'm also thinking about is, because I was looking at that article of like wellness in the museum, and I kept thinking about how museums use so much metrics. And so anyone who's coming in to process something is also in, like, there's no choice, but they become part of like the advertising and the marketing of the museum. And like their likeness gets used for saying this is the kind of programming we do. And so I feel like that was the kind of thing I was wondering if you can obscure, is like the way that there will always be the desire to capture almost like traumatic things as content for a larger institution. And then I was thinking about how there's a lot of examples of artists. I feel like the classic one is Adrian Piper photographing their body as they're reading through Kant, but like the body itself holds also all of this data. And then I'm thinking of like that making more sense than the specifics that I feel like you hang on to when they're in data, like even just a word becomes like this network thing because the word exists in like this living thing. And as much as the qualitative data of drawings is like, reminds me of like a somatic therapy way of like getting into some kind of thought, I always want there to be like a clearing of the slate so that like no one's just like, the final product is this drawing. And that's the thing that I feel like people get hung up on, is thinking that the most important thing about the art is this product, and the most important part of the art is the making of it. But in order to make it, you have to feel safe. So that's what I'm thinking about, is like, well, how do you make people feel safe in an institution? Because it already inherently is an extractive thing. So if you could promise things like anonymity, or your work is not going to be used for advertising, like things like that. It even reminds me of this weird synonym I always notice in working with people who are maybe uncomfortable telling really vulnerable stories. There's this idea that if you give students or kids masks, sometimes they can embody like the ability to tell a story, but they're like literally needing to hide themselves, which is interesting because there's also this concept of masking, which is, oh, you're not showing your real authentic self. And then I struggle with that concept of like, well, you should actually only do that in safe spaces, because not every space should you be revealing various things that could be dangerous to you. And so that's another thing that I was thinking about, was things aren't inherently safe to unmask. So then there's like, I feel like this is the part of the training of being trauma informed, is where are the spaces that are actually going to hold people as opposed to continue more harm. But yeah, those are just the ways that I'm thinking about people's data, including their art output, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I'm creating a safe space. That's, you know, kind of one of the reasons why I went back to school to become a therapist. So I hope that my training has been paying off. I think for the program at LACMA, I actually didn't do any data on it. I mean, LACMA collected people's emails in order for them to RSVP. But otherwise it was completely anonymous. I'm doing a case study on it, and so I reached out to people to see if they would be willing to share anonymous thoughts in their artwork. but I felt like we didn't take pictures of anybody there. It was a therapeutic space, which is really different than in, well, it's not really different, but it is than like the arts-based healing workshop, which is the second part of these events. And I need to call it an arts-based healing workshop because it's hybrid and I'm working over state lines. So it's like illegal for me to do art therapy over state lines or over country lines. But my training, I hope at this point, doesn't allow me to make that much of a variation. As far as like what I'm bringing to create a safe space. So yeah.
I have a thought, and I don't know how complete this is, but here it is. So what you're presenting is like a kind of a matrix of images that are connected by words or concepts like loved or like different sort of traumatic experience words. But I wonder what would happen, or maybe you've thought about this too already, if there was a network, a way of connecting the images and presenting like it, sorting by visual characteristics and then seeing what other words were associated with those visual characteristics. So like the way you've presented it now, the images that are sorted are presenting like a visualization of different feelings. But then if you sorted by the visual characteristics, you might get a presentation of what array of different kinds of feelings are being expressed by this visual characteristic.
Yeah, I mean, to do a qualitative analysis, I'm not sure if I can do that with this project. I did it for my thesis from grad school, and I would like to. I don't know, like this one is really focused on kind of challenging in a way these 7 core issues, and so while I'm really interested in the non-trauma story of our experience, I do, yeah, I don't know, but I do like the idea of qualitative analysis.
Wendy had a comment in the typing section. She has barking dogs, so can't unmute, but I'll just read what she wrote. Terrific project. You mentioned about keeping track of work data created by folks who do the workshops more than once. How might you present this work? Maybe it changes over time as folks do workshops with you in different environments. Are you encouraging participants to do multiple workshops?
I'm not necessarily encouraging them. I'm not like saying like come to more than one, but they're free. And so if people have the time, especially the people that are zooming in, I'm positive that there'll be at least a few people that repeat. What was the I like the idea of working with people more than once. I collected, when I did the being adopted, I had them fill out if they were interested in being part of more workshops. I don't know if I'll necessarily keep track of that data of how many times they interact with me. I mean, I guess I could at this point. I could. I have their names and email address, or at least the names that they want to use, and their email addresses. Yeah, maybe that's another piece that's not part of like this specific piece that needs to be completed by June of 2024.
We are at officially noon. So, you know, to respect everybody's time, this is when the meeting on paper ends. So if you have to go, totally cool. I know, Nick, you might be on a tight schedule today, but I wanted to thank Nicole Rademacher for presenting your work, and yeah, an amazing project, and being receptive to all our questions and comments, and being part of this community as well. Love having you here at the meetings. And also we're so close together physically, like neighbors. So I don't know if there's any other parting thoughts you want to leave us with, and then everyone, you know, people are welcome to stay and hang out. I'll leave the meeting open for more discussion, comments, catching up.
Yeah, I'm gonna put my email address because I don't think that you do open emails when you send out stuff. It's on my website, but if you have like follow-up comments or questions, feel free to reach out. I do have to run. Today is a busy day, and I'm on 9-year-old child duty after this. So, but thank you for letting me present. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you for your critical feedback and ideas and thoughts. I've been taking notes, and this is really, really great. Yeah, I've kind of been in my own little space, kind of developing the project, and haven't had a lot of feedback. So I really value what you guys have brought and mentioned to me.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. I always have a lot of thoughts after, so I'll probably email.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. I'm gonna jump off then. Bye.
Bye, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Bye.
I'm gonna head out too. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Good to see you, Christy.
Likewise.
Can we stop recording?
Oh, stop the recording?
Yeah.
And thanks for the reminder.